I think most people are aligned with 2025 being a fantastic bull market for the crypto space. And well, in today's video, I'm going to be giving you my price prediction for Bitcoin in 2025. I'll be sharing my thoughts and opinions as to how high I think BTC can go. As I get into today's video, if you do find this video useful and informative, smash that like button. If you are new to the channel, subscribe. And let's take a look at what's going on with Bitcoin. So here we have a Bitcoin paired up with the US dollar. This is the 1 week time frame. There's a lot of information here, and I'm going to kind of walk you through kind of what I'm seeing in terms of the chart. So far, we've seen a very interesting kind of start since we had the lows in December 2022. Some people are kind of telling you that maybe the bull market is over with a 375% run for Bitcoin. That would be the worst possible scenario for crypto market, right? Many altcoins not even really getting any kind of traction whatsoever, and Bitcoin having its worst bull market in Bitcoin history, 376%. Right now, I don't believe that the bull market has really even started, and we can see a lot of similarities to how kind of bear markets kind of reverse and kind of the gains that you see from those, and then you kind of see these kind of cooling offs, and then you get into the main kind of altcoin seasons and the main kind of Bitcoin season, and the kind of main bull market essentially. Everything else has been a bit of a relief. Now, obviously, when it comes to Bitcoin, we have seen this price action move a bit more aggressively than typical kind of bear market reversals. And the reason for that has been that the ETFs have basically driven a lot more interest and demand from the institutional side. It's made it easier for large investors to basically take part in buying shares in the Bitcoin ETFs. And those ETFs then have to buy the one-to-one value of Bitcoin and store it on Coinbase custody. So as such, there's been an increased demand for the actual BTC asset and taking it out as circulating supply. That's kind of a bit of a positive impact on the price action. But we don't want to trick ourselves into thinking that that's actually been a fantastic kind of volume driver, because in reality we can see the volumes are very, very low here in Bitcoin sense, right? So we haven't seen the kind of levels of demand coming in for Bitcoin in the kind of traditional crypto sense than we have done historically, right? You can see that right inside here where we were in 2021, which is this kind of volume profiles, versus where we are over here since pretty much late 2021 into 2022, 2023, and 2024. You can see the volumes are just really, really low. And that's consistent across the various different exchanges. Take a look at Binance Exchange, the biggest exchange based on volume in the world. And the volumes are exactly as you see here, same on Bitstamp as the data source that we're using. And so you know that the volumes are low because we haven't really got into the main event yet. The main event will be 2025. And I've been through this a few different times, but you can kind of see the reasoning in today's video as well. So 376%, it's been a great run, but it's not the bull market. The bull market will be significantly higher. Our current all-time high for Bitcoin is coming in at $73,974. The previous all-time high was coming in at $69,000. That means there's a variation difference between the 69,000 and of course the 73,794 was only a 6.95% variation. So should you be one of those really poor, unfortunate souls that bought Bitcoin at $69,000 and held it since 2021 into 2024, you've only gained 6.95%, right? And there will be people in that kind of camp. Not many, but there will be people there. So what about 2025? Well, we've had a great run. We've seen Bitcoin finding great support on the 50 EMA, 50 SMA. I still see us moving down a little bit more, potentially retesting 49,000, maybe a little bit lower. We'll see how that kind of plays out. You can still see that we have lower lows and lower highs here on the weekly time frame in the most recent price action. So again, nothing much has really changed here. I suspect we're going to have a little bit of a cooling off in the market before we get into the next kind of runs to the upside. So let's take a look at the previous kind of history here and take a look at kind of where we think things could be going. So in the kind of initial moves from December 2018 up to January 2019, we saw a pretty good run for Bitcoin, right? We didn't go up into new all-time highs like we did this time, but that was ETF driven. It was a 344% move. We then saw the cooling off in the market during the Federal Reserve interest rate cuts. Obviously, the pandemic was a lot worse, but we did see Bitcoin move down 53% before we got into kind of the typical kind of pandemic kind of crashes, which did total the crash crash of 72%. I don't think that's something that we can really kind of use. I would say that actually a 53% correction from its kind of peak in kind of that automatic rally after the bear market, a 53% correction and then into the bull market would be typically what we would expect to see. So we can already acknowledge that we've done something very similar. Yes, we went up into new all-time high, okay, due to the fact that we have had, ETFs and things like that, but we've had a 376% run, and we've already kind of cooled off quite nicely here, right? The cooling off has been 32%. And, we're talking 53, if we do drop down just a fraction lower, let's say 45K, we're talking 38%, right? These are the kind of inline expectations with what we've been talking about in terms of Federal Reserve crash. Now, obviously a pivot from the Federal Reserve happened a lot later than what we saw with the European Central Bank or the Bank of England. They pivoted much earlier. And so I do think that the market's had a bit of a warning as to kind of what's been going, which is why we've seen cooling off since March, in my opinion. So where we are at the minute is very, very interesting. We find support. We might have a little bit of a wobble. We might have a little bit more of a move to the downside, but it doesn't negate the idea of a bull market in 2025. Now, if I zoom out of this, so I've been through this a few different times on the channel, and I'm going to do it in today's video as well. We've been looking at the market, or Bitcoin's price action, through the lens of the US election. Okay, so we have an election year, we have the year after the election, we have 2 years after the election, the pre-election year, the election year, and so forth, right? And if we take a look at this data, we have a bull market 1 year after the US election. Okay, it has happened every single time. That means that this year is an election year. Next year, 2025, is going to be a bull market peak if history repeats itself. If you believe that history repeats itself until it doesn't, essentially we should be expecting, based on this analysis, that the year after the US election, we are going to have a bull market peak. Now, historically, it's been in Q4, okay? Every single one of these is Q4. So not only is it 1 year after the US election, but it is also Q4 of that year, okay? And we go back to the 2013 bull market being Q4, peak in November. We have 2017, that's December. We have 2021, that was November, okay? So we're going to be looking for Q4 2025 to be the peak of the bull market for Bitcoin. Okay, so after breaking all of this down and understanding, we have got some pretty interesting gains to be made, how high do we actually think Bitcoin can potentially go? And well, for that, we are going to think about the kind of diminishing gains that we see over time, because it is a valid thing that we need to acknowledge, which is in the very early days, it was quite easy because there was very little Bitcoin and some interest in it at the time for Bitcoin to move massive amounts. We saw 51,000% in that kind of first bullish market of 2013. After that, we go into the 2017, right? And what do we see here? Well, we see a fantastic run again, 9,600%. Then, of course, we go into the pandemic crash of 2020 up to 2021 peak. Again, we see 1,600%. So we already see diminishing gains over time, 51,000 to 9,000 to 1,600. Are we going to be looking for 1,000% from our 2022 low, or are we going to be looking for something a little bit less than that, right? And this is really where we need to be realistic about our expectations, because I don't think we are going to hit 1,000%. I just don't think we're going to do that. But I do think there's going to be some interesting kind of levels to be thinking about. Okay, so I'm going to just leave that there for a second, and I'm going to do is I'm going to connect all of these peaks together, and it's going to draw a kind of idea of a trend line to the upside. Okay, so if we go ahead and do that, and we start by snapping or just drawing this roughly in over here, and we start addressing this kind of elasticity to the Bitcoin price action. It's going to be a little bit fiddly to try and draw this in, so bear with me just 1 second here as I start to adjust our curvature to marry up with our expectations on the Bitcoin price action. As you can kind of see, this is not an exact science. You're trying to get the peaks to come together. And as we do, we kind of see, yeah, this looks quite neat. Okay, so when we take a look at this, we can see that we got close in 2021, but didn't quite hit it on this particular scenario. So we need to just adjust our curvature to bring that in line here as well. Okay, if we do this, we can then start to see that actually there is an elasticity to Bitcoin Bitcoin's price action that means that we are unlikely to see the kind of gains that I think many people are kind of expecting in the market. Now, again, we're going to adjust this a little bit further just to make sure that we are, kind of predicting out everything correctly here, but you can kind of see by moving this around and adjusting it and connecting all of these levels together, we get to a point where we connect all of these together and we can start to actually predict out where our 2025 lines are likely to be. Now, for me, this looks likely to be in excess of 6 figures, but I have done this more accurately in the past, and I'm going to try and draw this out. If we do end up with a quarter kind of 4 finishing, we are going to be looking for around 770%, so maybe up to 800%, and we are going to be looking for Bitcoin to kind of finish in and around that kind of range of, I'm just going to draw this in approximately where I have it to that kind of expectation, $100,000 to $140,000. I think is really where we can see the possibilities of 2025. Okay, now if we kind of think about where that might mean in terms of rallies, I know some people have been kind of looking at Bitcoin through the lens of maybe it's an impulsive kind of breakout, that kind of situation, trying to apply Elliott wave theory where possible. It doesn't really work, Elliott wave theory, on the kind of impulsive movements, but you can, of course, see some corrective actions going in here. I think we have the idea of maybe a finishing kind of ABC structure going on in there. So we have kind of 3 waves going up, correction, another kind of 3 waves going up. But to me, it does look likely that we are to see 2025 being a good year, where we do see $100,000 to $140,000. Obviously, depending on when we kind of reach into these upper areas, you can kind of get the idea as to kind of where that price action is heading. So yeah, it's going to be a good year, but it's not going to be the 150, 200,000, $1 million BTC, in my opinion. I think we have some reasonable expectations to kind of see Bitcoin moving out towards that kind of 100 to 140. I'd be more inclined to think more about 130 than I would 140, but time will tell whether or not we can break that idea of diminishing gains over time, whether we can push more than 800%, which I think is unlikely, but it's something to kind of keep in mind that it's a possible scenario nonetheless. Now, these are just my thoughts and opinions on the data in the charts as I see it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, or join us in our free Discord server. We would love to hear from you. And if you haven't done so already, guys, check out this video right here. It's not one you're going to want to miss.